The sun was dropping low over the wide horizon, painting the sky in a burning orange that bled into the dusty earth. In that fading glow, the town looked more broken than alive, and the lone cowboy riding into it carried the weight of silence with him. His horse's hooves stirred up clouds of dirt, and eyes from shuttered windows followed him, cautious and weary, as though danger always rode on the same trail as strangers. He wasn't searching for trouble, but destiny often had a cruel way of putting broken souls in front of one another. He stopped at the sound of a whimper, faint, almost lost in the whistling wind. Behind the abandoned saloon, in the shadows that smelled of stale liquor and old sins, he saw her, kneeling in the dirt, trembling, clutching her torn dress against her body as if the fabric was her last shield. Her hair hung tangled across her face, matted with dust, and her voice cracked as she cried out, "I'm filthy, don't touch me!" The words cut sharper than a blade, not aimed at him, but at the ghosts of men who had stolen pieces of her spirit. For a moment the cowboy froze, unsure if stepping closer would wound her more. But something in his chest stirred, a kind of ache only seen in men who'd lost things too precious to speak of. Slowly he knelt down a few feet away, removing his hat, lowering himself not as a rescuer, but as someone willing to share her ground. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice steady like a river, "the dirt don't define you. Dust washes off. Pain don't last forever." She shook her head violently, hugging herself tighter, the tears leaving clean trails down her face. "You don't know what they did. You don't know what I am now." Her voice was raw, broken glass in the throat. The cowboy's eyes darkened, not with judgment, but with the weight of understanding. He had seen war. He had seen men crawl through mud with shame in their eyes. But he knew beauty wasn't measured in scars or stains. He took a step closer, ignoring the way her words begged him to stay back, and he reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a simple wooden brush. Its handle worn smooth by years of use, he held it out. "May I?" he asked gently. Her breathing hitched. No one had asked her permission before. No one had treated her as if she still had a choice. Slowly she gave the faintest nod. The cowboy moved behind her, lowering himself to her level, and with a patience rare in this world, he began to brush through her tangled hair. Each stroke was careful, not to tug, not to hurt, but to remind her that tenderness still existed. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was healing. The dust fell from her hair like burdens slipping away, and for the first time in years, she felt the faint spark of being seen, not for what had been done to her, but for who she still was underneath. She closed her eyes, and the sobs that came weren't cries of shame anymore. They were the first steps of release. The cowboy didn't speak again, for words weren't needed. The night had settled by the time the cowboy finished, and the stars scattered themselves across the velvet sky like promises waiting to be kept. A fire crackled nearby, throwing warm light against their faces, and for the first time she sat without curling into herself, without hiding behind her arms. Her hair, though still streaked with dust, flowed freely around her shoulders, shining faintly in the firelight. She touched it in disbelief, as though she didn't recognize the woman reflected in the shimmer of his gaze. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice softer now, stripped of the sharp edges it once carried. The cowboy leaned back against a log, his hat resting on his knee. He stared into the fire as though searching for an answer written in the flames. "Because no one deserves to believe the lie that they're ruined," he said. "Life tries to break us, make us feel filthy, unworthy, but beauty ain't something that dirt can steal. It's in the fight you still got left, in the way you survive." She stared at him, her eyes wide and shimmering, and for the first time she didn't feel like prey or property. She felt human again, alive. The cowboy's words didn't just touch her, they mended cracks she thought were permanent. "But I don't feel beautiful," she whispered. He turned his head then, his eyes locking on hers, steady as stone but gentle as dawn. "Beauty ain't always a feeling, darling. Sometimes it's what others see when you can't, and I see it right now." Her chest tightened, and her tears came again. But these were no longer the tears of shame. They were tears of awakening. She let herself cry openly, And when the cowboy moved closer, brushing a final strand of hair from her face, she didn't shrink away. She leaned into his hand, allowing herself to believe, if only for a moment, that she was worth more than the shadows she carried. In that silence, something changed. She wasn't healed completely. Wounds, like hers, don't vanish overnight, but a crack of light had broken through her darkness. And the cowboy, without asking for anything in return, had given her that light. She smiled faintly through her tears, and he returned it, tipping his hat with a quiet nod. Tomorrow, the world would still be harsh. Tomorrow, her past would still whisper in her ear. But tonight, by the fire, with her hair brushed clean and her spirit reminded of its worth, she felt beautiful for the first time in years. And sometimes that's enough to begin again.